Good morning again, Kalimera, and thank you for being here again for our second day of this third new Eleusis Symposium. We showed you this little video again, first of all because it was the first thing we did, but also because I want to show how we can engage people in this type of activity. And maybe you noticed the very impressive music, which is the music of one of our biggest Greek composers, Vangelis. When Myrtovu Natsu, back in 2017, chose that music, she told me, we have to be careful because we have no rights for the music. And we can use it for our internal meeting in Delphi, but then we have to change it. And I said, why? Why don't we just go and find Vangelis and ask him how he feels about it? And I did it. And he said, wonderful. I'm happy to give you this music. Please keep it. And it was like, opening up for him a new way also of engaging as an artist. And for us, of course, it was a beautiful gift. So let me move to today's first session, Re-enchanting the Economy. It seemed to have surprised certain people who told me, some journalists, okay, we understand the rest, the inner transformation and the education and art and all that, but the economy? What do you really think you can do as far as the economy goes? So we have chosen 3 themes for this morning. I'm going to introduce the first, and then Stefanos Gandolfo and Nicolas Giatromanolakis are going to introduce the other 2. And then, of course, we have, I think, a very interesting keynote speaker that will follow, a speaker who will follow. But let me start with the first, because first things first, investments, okay? This is what people think, first of all, when they think about economy, money. I'm afraid they don't always realize what nature is giving us as far as economic value goes. I was reading again and again over the last days that the percentage of what nature offers to the economy is more than half of global GDP. And in Europe, it's like 2/3, 66% is given to us by nature. When our rivers are clean, where our ecosystems work, when our forests thrive. So let's not make that separation. But now I'm going into the conversation with, I think, the best person to bring that theme up. I cannot see him because I have this light in my face today. I don't know why. I didn't have it yesterday. And that is Kostas Tselenis from the Greek Impact Hub, who lives in Switzerland and works on impact investment for many, many, many years and brings the experience both from Switzerland, but also from what he tries to do in Greece. Kostas, welcome. So, maybe for those who are not in the field of the economy, why don't we just start with a very simple question. What is impact investing? And how does it really differ from philanthropy or, of course, traditional investing?
First of all, it's a great honor and pleasure to be here. You were right, Alexandra. It's sometimes the themes might not connect, finance, investments, nature, but we have identified a methodology many, many decades back. And this is exactly the reason, this methodology that inspired me to go that route. Well, I actually started with normal investments in the finance world and banking. The methodology for me is a revolution. And this revolution is the only way that we can manage to pipeline the necessary capital that we need in order to address environmental and social challenges globally. So we realized relatively early that philanthropic capital or state capital and the respective budgets would never be enough to address this kind of environmental and issues and the problems that we're facing in society. So this revolutionary methodology started 20 years back, as I said, from the next generation members of very large families that were brainstorming around what can we do with our money? How can we put our money to work with purpose in order to address these challenges? And that's how the impact investing methodology was born. And simply said, those are investments that they are financially sustainable, so investments for profit, that nevertheless have a technology, a service, or a product that addresses a global or local social and or environmental problem.
Why it matters now? Obviously, I think we more or less all know the answer. But what is the size of this market? Who invests? You just said. But what about the size? What about what I would call the challenges and the opportunities?
So we're still at an early stage, I would say. There has been a lot of publicity around impact investing, especially because the next generation member of the families are investing in that, but also because institutional investors like pension funds and insurances and asset managers are gradually going into that direction. They also realize something else. They realize that the old economy investments, they're not only damaging our environment, but they're also bad investments. So when the regulation started, let's say in European Union context, if an investor today has an old economy portfolio, it's per definition a non-performing portfolio. It's a bad portfolio of investments. And the reason is because the risk profile of the old economy investments is very high. When investors are investing, they're thinking about returns, but they're also thinking about risk. It's always a fine balance because the risk between the risk and the return of a potential investment. So the old economy investments will not perform, and we know this. The new economy investments that are fully aligned with environment and society, per definition, are going to be also more profitable. So with this basic theory, we realize that this is the only way to mobilize the capital that we need into nature and to society problems.
Can you give us an example? Maybe we should become a little bit more concrete so that people can really imagine what it means, this type of investment.
Happy to do so. When I started this sustainability investing journey 25 years back, there was no market for it. So in Zurich, I had the pleasure and the luck probably to meet in person one family member of the Brenningmeier family, which is one of the largest families in Europe, coming from the textile industry. And Marcel had a vision, and he said, like, how can we invest in technologies to facilitate the transition from fossil fuels to renewables? So we ended up doing the first solar tech investments globally as a private investor. And I will still remember my first conference, my first solar conference in Germany. I think it was maybe 50 people, a lot of them nature fighters, so not the typical investment manager profile, and a lot of crazy scientists as well that were exploring solar technologies and what we can do that. So 20 years later, 25 years later, we're talking about a multi-billion renewable energy generation industry. We see solar parks, we see wind parks. So I'm very proud of this work that we did 25 years back because it was catalytic work. We provided the catalytic capital to these scientists so that they can develop the solar technologies so that we can talk today about renewable energy generation. So one key example is renewable energy. We are talking about waste management technologies, a technology, for example, that can take whatever we unfortunately creating on the waste side, and we're polluting the environment, into a valuable proposition, into a product or a raw material. We
Yes,
have,
you know that this is one of our themes today, actually.
exactly,
So I'm very much looking forward to that panel
exactly.
too.
Exactly. We have done an investment with a Swiss Impact Office in Zurich in an alternative plastics manufacturer in Israel. Alternative plastic for food packaging coming out of natural materials. So this is a way that we can use nature's products in order to solve global environmental problems like the plastic plague. We have done investments in microfinance, of course, which is providing access to finance for the non-financeable, so the small enterprise in Kenya or the small household in Uganda. We have been doing investments throughout the spectrum that are connecting to the SDGs that we all know. So the magic of impact investing is that it has a very broad thematic and spectrum. So it's very difficult for an individual investor not to find a theme that can be inspired for sustainable food, sustainable agriculture, circular economy solutions, but more and more also social ventures that can over time become financially sustainable and profitable. And I will add something here if you allow. Why do we want them to be financially sustainable? Why are we talking about profitability? When we liaise with the philanthropic community as impact investors, they usually say, yes, is profit really the driver when we're talking about environment and society? And I said, yes, because a profitable business will also be scalable. And if we really want to solve a social and environmental problem, we want scale. Whatever is only financed with philanthropic capital eventually would stay small. It's going to be a beautiful venture. It's going to be a beautiful initiative, but it will never scale so that we can have an impact, a substantial impact on environment and society. So we're using this kind of financial profitability, financial sustainability to be able to first inspire the global markets, the investment markets, and secondly, to scale up the solution so that they can have a result.
One of the first instruments we heard about when it comes to finance and the climate issues is, of course, the carbon markets. Carbon markets demand simplicity. They're a very clear financial tool. But we are now more and more hearing another word, actually, even instead of sustainability, regeneration. And of course, regeneration thrives on complexity. And things become more complicated, maybe, for a pure financial approach. So we hear now about biodiversity credits. I'm not so sure the difference between biodiversity credits and nature credits, with which I want to end this conversation, because it was one of the best and most inspirational things I learned this summer. So can you say a few things about carbon markets, limitations, and then, of course, moving to biodiversity credits?
Happy to do so. First of all, nature finance has emerged as a main theme in recent years for the impact investing community. We realized, and I remember from one of our discussions that we had recently, that we have to reapproach how we see nature. So the realization that nature is an asset, and you mentioned that at the beginning today, it's an asset and not something that we just have to protect. It has value. So we realized there were two different angles of why we're destroying nature, to start with that. The first was overuse of the resources that we have because we're growing and we're using more and more resources. And any kind of, let's say, consumer conscious or regulation will never be able to reduce this exhaustive use of the resources. So we have two solutions, plus climate change, which is putting a lot of pressure on nature. So with these two parameters, right now, we need to redefine how we see nature. And if it's an asset that is very valuable, what do we do with the valuable assets that we have? Our homes, the things that we love, the people that we love. We want to protect them, but the question is, how do we advance them as well. So how can we make nature more robust? When we're talking about carbon credits, this was a revolution. It's the first time that we said, okay, we have nature, it has an asset, and it actually produces something that the market wants. And why does the market want carbon credits? Because of regulation. Big corporates will need to reduce their carbon footprint. So all of a sudden, we were in front of the question, where are these carbon credits are going to come from? So a forest, a new forest, has carbon sequestration and therefore can issue a carbon credit. And the corporate in Zurich or in Athens or in Germany will have to go and buy to reduce their profile. So all of a sudden we had the basics of a demand and a supply. We had the basis of a market. Now, is that enough? No, because it can create opportunistic approaches. Say somebody takes a field that is deforested, puts a plantation, cuts down the trees after 20 years, takes the carbon credit money. This is not a sustainable approach. So now what's happening is we're trying to create a new market for biodiversity credits, not only carbon credits. So all of a sudden, we realize that the big corporate, like a tremendously big food company, will also have a biodiversity negative impact on the environment. And they will have also to reduce their negative impact as well. So all of a sudden we have a new proposal of creating a new biodiversity market. Third angle, ecosystem services. You build a forest, and I'll tell you an example. We have done the first reforestation, biodiverse reforestation investments in Panama, some 10 years back already, even before the carbon markets were there. We believed in the concept. So the Panama Canal is losing every year 2, 3, 4 centimeters of their water level. This is costing them millions and millions of money every year because the ships cannot go through. So the Panama Canal has asked, can you please build a couple of forests around the Panama Canal so that I can preserve the water that I need to run my business model? This is an ecosystem service. So how can we rethink what the forest produces, what is the value of the forest, and then monetize that in a proper way in order to be able to extract even more and more and more value. And by collecting this capital, we can reforest more. We can show a couple of some numbers around reforestation in the first slide, if it's possible, to put everything in context.
Please. It's for you.
Thank you. I hope I'm doing the right thing.
Okay. Here you have it.
So, all right. So if we look first of all at the damage, and I'll be very quick, you stop me, Alexander, wherever I have to. We're talking right now about a 5 trillion gap for nature. 5 trillion gap for nature, and this is not for the very long term. This is for the next 5, 7, or 8 years. So let's see how much deforestation we had over the last year. So from 2001 up to last year, we lost 500 million hectares of forests. This is 1% every year. 1% every year. So if we do nothing about it, and there are a lot of areas that will not recover and regenerate by themselves. So if we lose 1% every year, then with 100% probability, we're not going to have any forest in 20, 30, or 50 years. And the same numbers we see in the European Union, the same numbers and the same statistics we see in Greece. So now, we calculated, the European Union has done, the World Bank has done, we have calculated how much money do we need to reforest that. And you see the amount is tremendous. We're talking about 500 billion every year for the next 10 years in order to reforest this forest. So where is the money going to come from? The states cannot pay for this money. I'll give you an indicative amount of the Greek state was 60 million, which was the highest budget ever last year, so they allocated a lot of resources. There is a tremendous effort on reforestation from the current administration. But if you put down the numbers and the reforestation need globally, we will never be able to refinance these activities with European Union philanthropic money or state money. So this gap can only be closed by private, profit-oriented capital. Private, profit-oriented capital. And we need to inspire these capital markets. How do we inspire them? As we said before, the forest has a value and it has a revenue. So once the forest has a value and a revenue, then it's the only way that we can start pushing this capital into the right direction, as long as we have a very strong framework. The European Union, we had the discussion recently, came up with a nature credit approach, and you asked me what's the difference, right?
Yes, I would really like to stress this because it came to me as a good news, and it came to me in the middle of the summer. And very strangely, it didn't come from Europe, it didn't come from Brussels, it didn't come from Greece. It came from California, from somebody whom I'm following, has a very interesting newsletter on those issues. And suddenly I learned that on the 7th of July of this summer, the European Union very silently, without much fanfare, released something that they called Roadmap Towards Nature Credits. And this was described in that Californian newsletter as an act of courage. Maybe the moment we begin to rewrite the contract between capital and life. And I was as enthusiastic as disappointed that something like that is happening in Europe from Brussels, that we tend to criticize so often, that we don't follow enough, don't appreciate enough of what we have on our continent. And this is why I wanted to put this theme today very centrally. And I'm going very soon now to invite 2 other representatives from Greece to discuss this European roadmap and see what opportunities it offers, not only for Europe and for the world, but also very concretely for Greece. So maybe you can comment on this European roadmap if you have something to add.
I do, and we're following very carefully right now all the global and European Union initiatives around this theme. Because we're going to need very soon a framework. How do you measure this? How can we avoid greenwashing? How can we monetize these services that the forest is producing? So for us, it's of extreme importance to understand better. Right now, it's more of a theoretical framework, the nature credits. It's more of a roadmap, but it will need to be specified so that the investment community can have like a guidance how we're going to start calculating this kind of returns at the second stage. So we are very hopeful that this is going to evolve quickly.
But apparently, Kostis, there are pilots that are already functioning, both in Europe. I read something about French wetlands and, of course, forests in Peru. And I mean, this is already happening. It's just that we need to work more on it, make it more, as you say, specific and measurable. But the ball has started rolling, as I understand it.
Fully agree. So our second challenge now is how can we mobilize these amounts of capital? We need another 300 billion per year in order to do that. Even the framework is perfect. We need to mobilize the private investment community, the impact investors, and the normal investors, and the mainstream investors. They can have every good reason to invest. They're not invest in something else that's not going to perform. What the challenge here is to allow for the right projects to materialize. So a biodiversity intense forest rather than just a plantation. And I'm going to show you very quickly how that worked with our investment so far. So you have the depleted land on the left, and the way that you reforest, the different the different years that you can do carbon sequestration, and you can issue carbon or in the future biodiversity certificates. And then you can see gradually how biodiversity is coming back. We were shocked with the results of the forests that we did 20 years back. Revisiting them, they really and literally look as a jungle, but they have commercial characteristics. And actually, we're not only reforesting, we're empowering the forests. So we're making them more robust with science than the natural forest is, because the natural forest is today weak because of climate change. So it's how we can make them even stronger so that they can produce even more in a sustainable way, so that we can refuel our economy as well. So if you look at it from all the angles, the way, if it's done properly, and this is the proper way of doing reforestation, then it has a lot of benefits. So we thought, what about Greece? What about south of Europe? So when I was at the COP29 in Baku, we started some first discussions on how can we replicate these models from Latin America in the Mediterranean region, starting with pilot projects in Greece. So we came down with a methodology using blended finance models, so still using the budget from the European Union and the state capital, but pairing it with private investor money, and be able to do exactly this in Greece and the Mediterranean region. And I think we have to think beyond that. And that's how, for example, the World Human Forum agenda then connects forests and mental health, forests and cultural, rural community advancements. I was, yesterday when I came, I went to the house of my parents, which is outside of Athens. And then we went to a local taverna. We're having some discussions about volunteers that the whole area was burned last year, unfortunately. And I was having a discussion with the locals that are volunteering for reforestation. And I started explaining this model. I said, like, if you would work for a normal salary, would you stay in the village? If you would work with a purpose and a salary, would you advance the community? And I think that this is the actual key. We can have sustainable tourism in the forest that we reforest for carbon certificates. We can have mental health solutions in the forest, which is the #1 environment to address mental health problems. So if we think a little bit more extensive and beyond just the economic model of how we do that for the carbon certificates, then we can create a very rich palette offering of what we do here. We can empower local and rural communities that are dying right now. Everybody's going to the centers because of the job opportunities. So it's not only about the developing world countries, it's about also the periphery of Europe, and Greece is part of it.
Thank you for saying that, because precisely here in Elefsina, we do hope to continue to support a project that has to do with the forest and art. And actually, as World Human Forum, I'm afraid we don't have this video this year, but we showed it last year, an amazing story of a young architect in Amman, in Jordan, in Amman, who used to be an architect and who was so desperate to see all that concrete around her that she launched this Japanese method. If we find the video, it's a very short video. You have it? Okay, we will share it on your email addresses tonight. So we don't have much time left, and I would like, as I said in the beginning, to ask for 2 more chairs, or maybe 3, I don't know who is here. I certainly see Petros Varilidis, Secretary General from the Ministry of Environment and Energy. Petros, please join us. And also Doran Donakaki from the Bank of Greece, who is responsible for climate and environment issues. Dora, yes, maybe να κάτσω εγώ εδώ, για να τους βλέπω όλους. Αλλά δεν πειράζει, κάτσε εδώ. Το ίδιο κάνει. And I don't know if Mrs. Pallis is here again. She was here yesterday from, okay, join us please also from Greece ESG, because of course, όχι, κάτσε εσύ εδώ. Άλλη μια καρέκλα. Because of course the role of the corporates is important and ESG must not remain something that is separate from their core work, but also become in the center. So thank you for being here, and I know that it's not in 10 minutes that we're going to do something, but I also know that we plan to continue working together, and this is actually the way we have done it when we started our work on psychedelics 2 years ago from Elefsina. This is what we did last year when we started talking about children's addiction on algorithms who make them really addicted, and this happens by design and not by accident, and putting all the responsibility on the parents and the teachers is very unfair, because it's the big corporates who do it by design to make money out of this. So it's the kind of thing, the kind of, I would say, challenges and conversations we like to launch and then hopefully continue. So you are here now just to give us a short feedback of what you just heard, and how, and if you believe that we can really go a step further in Greece, because I haven't seen anything like that happening right now in the pilot projects in Greece, and maybe I don't know about it, or maybe if we don't have it, maybe we should. So I will start with the government representative, Petros Varilidis.
Thank you for the invitation. That's a very interesting topic, and one of my dearest one. It's something that we're trying to promote in the Ministry of Environment. We believe that the economy and the society in Greece is ready for that from a political point of view. There is interest. Of course, in any kind of investment is not inherently profitable or non-profitable. So it has to do with the enabling conditions that we create as a government, the state that puts down the rules of the game in order to make something profitable that now may not be. So how we do that? We have the environmental impact assessment that requires specific terms and conditions. So internalizes part of the environmental cost in the investment, so makes some investments more expensive than they would otherwise be, or socialize part of the cost of a good investment in the sense that the state does part of the investment, so that reduces the cost for the green investment. And we have to find the right balance so that, you know, the economy and the society can follow the rules that we set, the rules of the game that we set. So in that sense, we have the climate law, the national climate law, 4936 of 2002, where we have the, of course, there we have foreseen the creation of a voluntary carbon credit scheme. We are working on it because, as you said, you need to have fixed and robust rules, how you measure it and how you monitor it, how you ensure that in 20 years they're not going to cut down the trees. and that was it. So this is in a quite mature phase, and I'm referring to that because the truth is that there you have already monetized the costs or the profits. So I believe when we are talking about nature credits, we need to use.
But it's another logic, nature credits. That's the path. Can we do it?
We need to use that model in order to give value to nature project. And one idea which is embedded in the national climate law is that the idea we have is that we can offer super credits in this carbon credit system to those solutions that are at the same time they genuinely serve nature projects. So you have, to give a tangible example, maybe you reduce, you absorb 100,000 tons of CO2, but this is measured, you get a credit for 150,000. So that's a super credit. So this way you create an inherent value to the project, and then you attract private money to that. So that's an idea.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move to the private sector. Alexandra Pali, ESG in Greece. So how will you sell this idea to the members of the community of corporates?
Well, because we live in the decade of ESG, environment, social, and governance, our network, CSR Hellas, it's the Hellenic Network for Corporate Social Responsibility, partner of CSR Europe. Mrs. Antonakaki here is our member, our proud member, I hope. And what we do is 160 companies from the private sector mostly are our members. They care a lot about ESG. They have to comply with ESG. They have to comply with the regulations set by the European Union and Europe regulations in general. Even though we live in the Trump planet where all these ESG regulations as far as the United States is concerned are, let's say, abolished, whoever wants to invest, like what you were talking about before, to invest in a European company, whether it's Greek or anything, any other country of Europe, they have to comply with these regulations. It's not a burden, it is a necessity. Impact investment is very, very important, and we see from surveys that we have done in the Greek economy. Don't forget that the Greek economy consists of mostly small and medium-sized enterprises, not only here in Elefsina that we are today, but all over Attica and all over Greece. And most SMEs find all these regulations like more paperwork, very expensive, and they cannot comply with that. It is not true. What we do is we try to help them, because if they want to have access in financing by the European Union, access in financing by banks, access to investors, plus the Generation Z, and many of us as well, who really care about the environment, about social, and about governance. Therefore, if they do not comply, they will be out of the market. One more issue in the private sector is that an SME that does not comply with what the regulations, the correct and proper regulations say, is that they will not be included in the supply chain of larger enterprises. For example, here in Elefsina, next door, we have Titan, for example, the cement company, huge company. They have many, many thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises in their supply chain, and because they care a lot about the environment and the ESG issues, they ask for all the companies that work with them to comply. Surveys that we carried out, we see that enterprises and people in general, they care about the environment. The environment is very important. Greenwashing, you said before, it's a very important issue, especially for enterprises, because some could be accused, in quotations, of using the planet, using paper, using forests, and using means that have to comply with environment regulations for greenwashing, which is dangerous. But like we said yesterday with the psychedelics, again, you have, like Greeks say, metron ariston, you have to know how far you can go. Then we saw that it's very important inside the private sector enterprises, the social, the well-being of in the families, the well-being of employees. and of course governance, because we are talking about transition, we are talking about transparency, we are talking about charity, and again, it's very important to have the proper regulations. Yesterday we talked about the relations and how to enchant our private lives and relations in the society, and today we talk about the economy.
Thank you, Alexandra. And now I'm turning to on my left and from the Bank of Greece, and I want to thank you also because you have supported financially our event this year as a sponsor. So give us your position from the very important institution that is the Bank of Greece.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for addressing this issue. I think we all welcome the importance that nature is gaining at the global agenda, apart from, of course, certain challenges that we all know about. But definitely nature is something that is coming up more and more, also at the ECB and at the Eurosystem level. Nature is gaining a lot of attention. We have been working on climate issues for many years now, but since this summer, nature has been much more implemented into our formal processes and all the central banking business that we are doing at the Eurosystem and at the European Central Bank level. So we definitely welcome that. And of course, we have to be very clear about what sort of frameworks, what sort of regulation and governance we will give to this upcoming roadmap. I think it's very crucial that we are able to monitor the impact that we are expecting from this process and from the nature credits. Can we monitor locally? Can we monitor at scale? I think it will be a big question as to how we can actually see the positive impact that we are making. And I would also like to add another dimension, because this is all coming from a positive angle. How much positive action we can do, how can we monetize the positive action that we do to nature. But what about externalities? Shall we also go back and have a holistic view of what externalities and what impact our economy has on the environment? So apart from creating the tools and the framework to monetize and calculate the positive impact that we can make to the environment and then use that through nature credits, can we actually go back and discuss about the externalities that our economy has on nature and then make a holistic framework that can address at all scales how we can actually also have the positive but also the do no harm aspect of things. So I will finish with that. Thank you.
Thank you all, and let me just finish with those words. We must, I think, learn to see finance not as a tool to minimize risk, but as a partner to maximize life. And if we get there, then I think we will be looking towards a brighter future. Thank you all.